November 22nd, 2025. Well, there's a lot been going on this week, and I may have to do a second video to cover that. But for this one, I'm going to focus on a very major event, which is a little bit outside the normal political range, and that is the release of the movie Age of Disclosure, which has, I think, it's kind of a concise presentation of what's going on in the UFO disclosure area and presents evidence of the reality of this phenomena as the government has information on it that's been withholding the public, and it's in that line. It probably falls into the category of what people call controlled disclosure. The people involved are major figures, public officials, people from the military and intelligence community and so forth. The big wig, I think, and it would be Marco Rubio. At the time this was recorded, I believe, was a senator on the Intelligence Committee, but since has become Secretary of State and now acting National Security Advisor to President Trump's administration. So that's a major thing. Otherwise, on the people with the actual inside data, I would say you have Lou Elizondo and Jay Stratton as the two key figures that were on the, ATIP, and then and I think maybe both had worked on OSOP a little bit too, and so forth, and the UAP task force. Also, there's a segment with David Grush's comments on the News Nation. I don't think it's a live interview. I think it's just one that they took out of the Cold Heart interview. And so this is, I think this is a very major film, and we'll see how much distribution it gets. It's on Amazon Prime, particularly, and I've heard that there's some other website where you can watch it. The Amazon Prime site is not exactly, it's a pretty expensive one. However, the rental is a pretty good agreement. You have 30 days on the rental. So, well, it's a very expensive rental, and then to own it is just a little bit more. So whichever you want to do on that, if you're interested on that. I hope it gets into theaters too. I think there's some limited release in maybe New York and LA or something, but whether it'll get into the broader public, I don't know. I think that the people involved do bring a little bit of, support for the subject, little bit of seriousness to it. And I think for people that follow the subject closely, like I do, there's not that much new in it that you didn't already know before. So for that group of people, for those of you though, that my audience here in these videos, I think it's definitely not typically just the UFO community. It's mostly political people that are interested in conservative politics. And so I think that many of them, I doubt, are really, maybe haven't been following this as much as other people have. And this is be a chance to kind of get into this subject. It does present a pretty broad amount of information that's come out since, let's say, 2017. And I think it's worth looking at. If you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, or alternatively, you can follow me on Rumble, and the address is below. So yeah, I'll go through a little bit of what I think that's mainly in there. The notable thing, of course, is where Jay Stratton actually says that he's actually seen alien craft and alien bodies, and that is an interesting statement. I think that was in some of the promo anyhow, so they kind of spoiled their big reveal there on that one. But that is something I don't believe I've heard him say before the publicity around this movie. What we see is a lot of people who obviously had very high security clearance, and some of whom actually apparently have material knowledge of this, but because of security, they're unable to state it publicly, and these people are not inclined to break the law on it. So what they're doing is going right up to the limit of it, and some people might argue maybe a little over the line a couple of times, but it's close enough that it's at least in a gray area, and given this situation, they're probably not going to be prosecuted. I think that what is pretty much notable are the things that Rubio stated, because obviously he's now in a position to presumably do something about it. And being national security advisor, whether acting or permanent, I mean, he would presumably have the highest clearance and need to know to get access to anything they should want to. Now, of course, the bureaucracy might withhold, even though he should be able to get it. Maybe they won't give it to him. I mean, that's the problem you often have. And as you know, that President Trump in his first term had a lot of trouble getting a hold of key information about how the deep state had worked against him. We're kind of aware of that, aren't we? And so we can see that he may or may not actually have it. And I don't know to what degree he's been able to pursue it. Remember that the administration is very busy, obviously, with all the different things on their plate, all the different wars, particularly the Ukraine and negotiations with that, all these other smaller conflicts, the Middle East, Gaza, the tariff policies, the trade negotiations with various countries in order to reduce the tariffs, and all that sort of thing, and many other things, pretty much, kind of gives them a full plate. So going after the hidden UFO program may be not the highest priority, perhaps. It would be a higher priority for me, of course, if I was in that job, but then to paraphrase something that a former President Obama said, that's probably why you'll never be in, well, in his case, presidency, but never be in one of those jobs either, right? I mean, people, I always thought that was a good line, but anyway, when that guy said, the comedian said, the first thing he'd do after he got sworn in was get the UFO files. He said, well, that's why you'll never be president. But anyhow, so that's kind of the situation there. One interesting point was Lou Elizondo told about getting a phone call from somebody in Washington who apparently was privy to a discussion that occurred of a group of, I believe it was 23 people that controlled the program, and they were considering his assassination. I guess since he's still with us, they decided against it, or at least put it on hold for the moment. And maybe because, I mean, that would be kind of a giveaway given it to a cover-up if that were to occur. Which probably means if it were to happen, they would probably try to do something that would make it look more like an accident than a flat-out assassination. I guess he's assured us he's not suicidal, so we won't buy that if it happens. So I don't know that that's likely to occur or not. It does seem like what we really have, though, is a battle between, and you'll get that from the movie if you watch it, and between the established program, they call it the legacy program. I just tend to refer to it as the program, which I presume is what the people in the program call it, or maybe a code name they have. And then there was the OSOP effort of James Lukatsky, and that hired Bigelow Aerospace in order to, do the technical work for them, and that's a separate thing. And what I find interesting, which isn't really being discussed, although I'm sure they know it, what you're really dealing with, I think, is a bureaucratic battle between the established secret program that's been around forever, at least since the late 40s, probably in one form or another, and on the other hand, an upstart effort started by Senator Reid and some other senators, Stevens and I think Inouye, to investigate the subject and to promote something that would be more oriented toward disclosure, I think. And of course, this upstart program was probably viewed with great suspicion by the other people, and essentially what they ran into clearly is a turf war. And one group pretty much controlled the turf a lot better than the other group did, as it turned out. So that's kind of what I think is revealed. They go into a lot of different cases that you've heard before, what the nature of these objects are. There is some of the more scientific people involved in it. Hal Puthoff, particularly, they were discussing their theories on how the craft might operate. But remember that these theories are beyond, or what I would call beyond known physics. You can go to the best universities around and you're not going to learn any theories we could say how that could really be done for real. Their idea basically is that the creators of these craft apparently have learned some way to generate what would be basically an artificial gravitational field with some methods that's beyond what we know in standard general relativity. Because in that case, the actual coupling constant to the momentum energy term is so weak that there'd be no way that any reasonable amount of energy could do this. And they were discussing that one of these craft exhibited energy that might be on the order of 100 times, I forget how much, many times our own full electric grid of the United States. So the point I'm trying to get to is this is all speculative as to how it might work. However, there's observational evidence that these things really do exist. And if in fact we actually have some of these crashed or landed craft in our possession in secret labs somewhere in this country, that proves it's real then, if that's the case. But the point is, the people that control those facilities won't let us see them, and won't let the general scientific community see them either. Only a very restricted group of cleared people on the program actually get to deal with this stuff. And as I understand from all the rumors that have got out, it's highly compartmentalized, so that one individual scientist may only see one part of something, and not the rest, not the whole picture. So, at any rate, so that's kind of the world we're in, and it's worth a watch if you have a chance, particularly. I guess if a group of people could get together and somebody could buy it or whatever, it's not too bad, but it would be about like the price of going to a movie and refreshments, at least where I live. So, and then, but it's interesting. I would, it may become cheaper in the future. I really, well, it's useful to get this out to everybody, I think, and hopefully it'll stir up something. I know that David Grush's interview on Fox News finally occurred on special report with, on Friday night. So that was rumored was going to be out, but it had been held back. I guess it was for the launch of the film. Which is basically he's saying the same thing as always, and I think it was a relatively friendly interview. It wasn't sarcastic, I don't think. It was attentive. Brett Baer was fair with him, I believe. Although Grush is optimistic that Trump will move toward disclosure. I'm not as confident of that as he is, only because, as I like to put it, I don't know that this is the kind of alien he's most interested in. But it may be that I don't know what his real attitude is. Supposedly he has been informed and briefed on it by people. So, and obviously I'm sure that Rubio could definitely give him a lot of insights on it as well from what he learned on the Intelligence Committee. But perhaps the people in the program have convinced these people not to go forward in spite of everything. We have to remember that no administration has gone for disclosure at all. I mean, we do believe that Jimmy Carter wanted to, but he didn't. Kennedy may or may not have been interested, but, well, we know what happened there. I don't think it's connected. Some people do. I don't. Nixon supposedly was knowledgeable about it, but then again, in the Eisenhower years, he was really in on some of the most secret aspects of the Eisenhower operation. And those are two presidents, Truman and Eisenhower, that apparently really were fully informed of what was happening. So that kind of gives you the kind of landscape on this. I've offered the idea that as much as I would like to be told what's going on and learn a little bit about what we know about how these things actually operate, if we really know, but I can kind of see that why a government would not want to. For one thing, the very presence of these craft basically undermine our sense of national sovereignty from a governmental point of view. The government wants to be in charge, and these things basically humble the government in many ways. They can fly into our most sensitive sites, and there's apparently nothing we can do about it. They can evade our aircraft, and it probably wouldn't be wise to try to shoot them down, would be my opinion. They haven't really, attempts have been made, I believe, in both the United States and in the former Soviet Union. And I don't know about other countries. I think whether it was one, definitely Iran, we know about one in Iran, and those were unsuccessful. So, and I don't think it's advisable to do that anyhow, of course. But I'm saying that the fact that they can defy it, and I think that many of the things that are referred to as drones over major U.S. facilities and facilities in Europe today, leaving Ukraine out of it, of course, are probably various forms of UAP. I think that's very likely. I mean, they did try to blame some of the ones in Germany, I believe, over on Russia, but the descriptions that were made don't seem reasonable. It's unclear how Russia would do this particularly. Um, some light objects flying into Romania or Poland accepted as well. But when you go deep into Europe, I think it's a different question. Besides, many of them have been over air bases in Britain, at Langley Air Force Base, even before the big flap in New Jersey at the beginning of 2025. The one over Langley Air Force Base was home of the first Tactical Fighter Squadron, Fighter Wing, excuse me, was there, and apparently repeatedly, and they seem to be fairly large objects, and nobody was able to do anything about those either. We also added the fact that Trump, before being inaugurated, said the military knows where they are and where they're coming from, and then there was silence when he got in office for a while, and the FAA had testified to Congress that they didn't know who was behind them. And then Trump announced through his press secretary that they were FAA approved drones. Later, the head of Northern Command said that they didn't know what they were, the military. So you're kind of left with a situation to feel like the administration, when they found out what was really going on, went back into the denial mode, which all other administrations have done as well. So it's nothing unique. So we don't know. I think one thing is we don't really know what they know, and that may be the real kicker. I can imagine the problems they have. First of all, does any administration want to go out and admit the government has been, let's say, less than completely frank with the public? And then add to the fact to admit they can't control their own airspace, and to add to the fact that once you open this can of worms up, many questions come forward, some of which may be troublesome. What has happened to would-be whistleblowers in the past who tried to talk? There's rumors that some of them have met with an unkind fate, and then you have, I mean, then you have the stories of abductions, which are not at all discussed in this movie. But certainly in the popular culture, abductions are a major thing. And of course, they'd have to answer that question, I guess. And if the answer is yes, they're real, and no, there's nothing we can do about it, the public is going to start feeling a little less at ease. I think as long as there's a degree of deniability, even if people kind of know, but the government isn't officially saying it, they'll remain cool and calm about it. But like in the Orson Welles broadcast of War of the Worlds, when they had a guy doing a pretty good impersonation of Franklin Roosevelt coming on the radio telling everybody to remain calm, that's when the panic started. So I think that's the problem. Official confirmation could cause some issues. So at any rate, another thing I kind of noticed in there, and this is something I'd like somebody to ask Elizondo and company about, but they don't seem to ever do it. It's so obvious, is that he keeps talking about these the group of people in the Pentagon at high level that are portraying themselves as religiously conservative people who say that tell everybody to stay away from the subject because they're demonic. And I'm wondering, is that really because they're religious, or is that really because they're part of the program and that's the way they're trying to dissuade people without admitting that just don't look? In other words, by acting like they have this kind of closed-minded viewpoint about it and saying they're demonic, don't talk to me more about it, is a way to shut the conversation down without actually admitting that they're actually cleared for the program and part of it. that's just a thought that crosses my mind. I don't know if that's true or not, but I would love to have somebody ask them that question. And, you know, I mean, I'm not saying that people don't have deep religious beliefs. A lot of people, I've been saying, but why would I don't know. At any rate, that's one of the things that puzzles me a little bit, that isn't pursued a little bit more by people questioning it. But at any rate, so it's worth looking at, and I'm hoping it causes enough controversy and gets questions up to the White House and to Marco Rubio particularly, as well as President Trump, to see what they'll say about it now. I don't believe Marco Rubio's been asked about this subject since he's been a national security advisor. And it would be one thing I would say for people like Luna, Representative Luna and her people, why are you not talking to him about this? I mean, I know it's difficult because he's in a very senior position now, and you're kind of a relatively junior member of the House, but still, that would be an area of inquiry I think should be made. And obviously, we could get to the level where maybe we could get some kind of executive order declassifying a bunch of things and authorizing these people who supposedly don't have the clearance to hear it to simply declassify things so they can talk about it. Maybe a limited declassification, like you can't discuss what we've learned about the technology, if anything, but whatever. But you can at least admit that what you know about the objects existing, maybe about the beings that they found that inhabited them. That would seem to be interesting, and I don't think that itself would necessarily give an adversary an advantage, since they presumably, the ones that can do something, probably have their own examples to deal with. Anyway, that's my discussion of this, and like I say, I kind of apologize for discussing a lot of many important political things, but I thought this video kind of had a little precedence to go on this subject, and maybe I'll do something special, but to hit some of those other major topics that have obviously occurred this week. So all for now. I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble as always, and the address of my social media accounts are in the description below. All for now.